Okay, it is 6 p.m. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the DC Co-op Impact Grant Info Session webinar. My name is Jennifer Bryant, and I'm the Program Manager for Community Wealth Building Initiatives at the Washington Area Community Investment Fund. We're a DC-based regional CDFI, which is a community development financial institution. And I'm joined today by Allison Powers from Capital Impact Partners. And we're going to be sharing more about the second round of the DC Co-op Impact Grant. For those of you that have already joined us, if you could just drop a quick intro in the chat box, we'd love to know who you are. And if you're with the cooperative, what the name of it is, if you're thinking about starting one, what are you thinking about starting? Just go ahead and chime in the chat box. And we are going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to begin by just telling you a little bit about Wacif and Capital Impact Partners, the two organizations that jointly put out the DC Co-op Impact Grant. So the Washington Area Community Investment Fund, our mission is an equitable and just society where communities can prosper and thrive through entrepreneurship. And so we were started in the late 1980s. Our first loan was actually to the Pasadena housing cooperatives. And so for the last almost 35 years, we have given out loans totaling more than $35 million in direct investment. And that's gone to small businesses, affordable housing developments, cooperatives, childcare, and community facilities, and a whole host of other things. So this information is a bit dated. This is from last year, but it just shows that we are a small community development financial institution with big impact. These are some of the stats: the number of entrepreneurs served, loans closed, et cetera. Wacif has 4 core areas of focus. We have a number of signature initiatives, including the one that I lead, which is the DC Employee Ownership Initiative, and I'll share a little bit more about that shortly. We also just launched the Enterprising Women of Color Business Center, which is going to be running some cool accelerated programs and other things for women of color business owners in the DC area. We also have the JP Morgan Chase Entrepreneurs of Color Fund. We do a variety of workshops and trainings on different topics. We do one-on-one technical assistance, and we do small business financing. The program that I lead at Wacif is called the DC Employee Ownership Initiative. We support legacy business owners, which usually is businesses that have been around for 10 years or longer, in transitioning their businesses to employee ownership. So we help people sell existing businesses to their employees. We also do one-on-one technical assistance with people that are interested in employee ownership. We do different events like DC Co-op Day, grant programs like the DC Co-op Impact Grant, which we'll be talking about tonight. And we do a lot of work to build the cooperative ecosystem in the area through partnerships with DC government, through the Shared Equity and Economic Development Fellowship, the DC Cooperative Stakeholders Group, and the soon to be launched in June Center for Employee Ownership. And with that, I'll pass it over to Allison Powers.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces on the chat. Hope everyone is well. My name is Allison Powers. I am the manager of cooperative and community initiatives at Capital Impact Partners. You can go to the next slide, please, Jennifer. We are a national community development financial institution. This is our vision and mission. We like to say that co-ops are part of our DNA because we actually started as part of the National Cooperative Bank before we split off to become a CDFI. And although we work nationally, we have geographic concentrations in DC, Detroit, New York, California, and Texas. Next slide, please. This is just our impact over the 35 years that we have been around. We are one of the larger CDFIs in the country. Next slide, please. And here you can see some of our focus areas, because we are a CDFI or community development financial institution, we do lending, but we also do programmatic work and technical assistance, whether that means some grant programs like this one or public policy. We also do some investing. And you can see in that middle bracket, some of the other sectors we serve: healthcare, education, affordable housing, healthy food, and aging. Next slide, please. And this is our strategic pillars. So it's kind of the lens of which we do our work, addressing systemic poverty, creating equity, building healthy communities, and promoting inclusive growth. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see how that relates to kind of how we think about co-ops. We see them as opportunities to build economic opportunities. As Jennifer was saying before, we're working a lot right now in conversions, so where the existing owner sells the business to their workers. We think that co-ops create quality jobs, including wages, benefits, democratic control, that it can be, the model can help build access and stabilize community businesses, which I think we saw during this ongoing health and economic crisis, that co-ops tended to fare a little better and to be more rooted in the community. Next slide, please. And, there's just different ways that we support co-op work. We do it through financing and lending, through policy and partnerships, through, some local ecosystem work like this grant. And we also have the Co-op Innovation Award, which launches once a year. So it's different than this award, and it will launch on April 1st. And that's a national grant award that goes to programs that are working in community, but they're replicable nationally and innovative. And please let me know if you have any questions about that. And if you follow us on social media, you will get the link to that grant when it comes out on April 1st. Next slide. So this is just an overall, we've lent over $300 million over the years in co-op lending. I think that this is a real moment for co-ops, and that as people think about rebuilding the economy and what they want this post-pandemic world to be, that the cooperative model is really rising to the top as a way to create a more just and equitable economy. And I've been really excited that there's been so much traction and movement specifically in DC and kind of local government taking notice. And I see that there's some members of the DC Co-op stakeholders group on the call, and there's just been a lot of activity here, and so excited to see that grow and how this grant can help encourage that sort of local ecosystem growth. Back over to Jennifer.
Great, thank you, Allison. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the DC Co-op Impact Grant. If you have any questions, feel free to just drop them in the chat box. We'll also create space after the presentation for you to ask any questions. So to jump right into it, this is the second round of the DC Co-op Impact Grant. This is a grant program that we launched last year. And this is one of our first round grantees, Earthbound Building Cooperative, which is a Maryland-based cooperative that builds farm infrastructure. And I wanted to highlight them because I think that they were able to really use the grant to be catalytic for their business. After receiving the grant, they were able to launch a successful crowd funding campaign. And so that's what we really want from this grant. We want it to be catalytic for cooperatives. We want to use it as a way to amplify the existing co-ops in our area and help them to grow. So a little bit about the DC Co-op Impact Grants. Last year, we gave out 8 $5,000 grants, and this year we're going to be giving out 4 $10,000 grants. The grant deadline is April 19th. Excuse me. The grant application is really short. It's only 16 questions. We wanted to make it accessible to everyone. And for the narrative questions, the maximum word count is 500. So even if you don't have experience applying for grants or completing grant applications, we encourage you to apply for this one. It is not a heavy lift. The grant period is 12 months. And so that's the amount of time that you have to use the funds. And at the end of the 12-month grant period, then we just ask you to complete a budget and a short final report. So the purpose of the grant is to encourage the growth of quality jobs and sustainable businesses. We think cooperatives are a great way for leadership development in the community and asset building through the cooperative model in communities of color. We wanted to support early stage co-ops. We wanted to provide catalytic capital that will attract other funders. And so especially when you're just starting a business or you're starting a cooperative business in particular, it can be really hard to access capital at the beginning. And so we want to provide this $10,000 grant to kind of help you grow and get to the point where you can access capital from other sources. We also want to increase the exposure for DC area cooperatives and provide support for early stage cooperatives to become loan ready if they choose. And in the application, we mentioned that this is a grant program that's targeting communities of color and or historically marginalized communities. And we're defining that as communities, both urban and rural, that have been affected by bias structures and systems resulting in economic exclusion, displacement, underemployment, and the inability to create generational wealth. So eligibility, I've been getting a lot of emails since we launched the grant on the 4th of March about who is eligible for the grant. So if you have a cooperatively owned business that's led by people of color and or members of a historically disinvested community, and you live in DC, Maryland, or Northern Virginia, then you are welcome to apply. We welcome applications from cooperatives in all sectors, in all stages of development. And we are giving preference to food cooperatives, but all cooperatives are invited to apply. And just as a kind of brief explainer, how are we defining cooperative? Well, a cooperative, loosely defined, is a business that has a shared ownership structure, meaning that the employees of the business, or in the case of a food cooperative, the consumers of the business, have a share in both the profits and the decision-making of the business. So a cooperative is a business that has a shared ownership structure. Some of the cooperative sectors that may want to consider applying for this grant are food cooperatives, as we mentioned, worker-owned cooperatives where the workers share ownership in the business, consumer-owned cooperatives where the consumers share ownership of the business, purchasing cooperatives where people get together and bulk purchase goods for their mutual benefit. An example of that would be like the Community Purchasing Alliance, which is a DC-based cooperative. A platform cooperative, if you have an app or a tech cooperative, you're welcome to apply. And other folks are welcome to apply as well. This grant is not open to housing cooperatives, but if you have a cooperative business, then you should go ahead and apply. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it's open to co-ops at all stages of development. So on the right side of the screen, we list those stages here. So even if you're in the pre-startup stage, I think Candace, who is on the call, chimed in and said that she has an idea for a cooperative. You are able to apply for this grant all the way through established. And so Earthbound Building one of the recipients of the cooperative grant last year, they've already been around for a few years. So they're established. But whatever stage of development your co-op is in, you are welcome to apply. I just wanted to briefly go through the application questions so that you can see them and see if you have any questions about the questions. So it starts off just by asking if you are a cooperative business. And this is just a yes or no question, because if you're not a cooperative business, then this is not, if you're not a cooperative business that's led by people of color and or people in a historically disinvested community, then you wouldn't meet the eligibility criteria for this grant. 2, where is your cooperative located? What is the name of your co-op? If you are in the idea stage and you're not sure, just let us know what name idea you're thinking about, or give us a description of what your co-op business is. And then we ask if you received the co-op grant last year for our first round. If you did, you can still apply, but you just have to apply for a new scope of work. And it can be something that expands on the project that we funded last year, but it has to be new in some way. How would you describe the stage of development for your co-op business? And then we go on to ask, how would you define your co-op sector? And I included some of those co-op sectors on the previous slide, whether that be a food co-op or a purchasing co-op or a platform co-op. So tell us a little bit more about what sector your co-op business is in. Then we ask for the contact information for the person that the primary contact person for the grant. And that'll be the person that we notify to let you know whether or not you got the grant. That'll be the person that we send the grant reporting document to. So that'll be our primary point of contact with the co-op. And then we ask, how many community members do you currently have in your cooperative or who are engaged in the planning process? So if you and 5 people have been meeting to start a coffee co-op, coffee shop cooperative, then you would put 5 there. So we want to know how many people are involved in the planning, or if you already have a cooperative, how many members you have. And then we'll ask about the mission of your cooperative and a recent accomplishment. And if you're in the idea stage, a recent accomplishment might be that you've had 3 meetings already. And so that also counts. How is your business using the cooperative model to encourage growth of quality jobs and services, leadership development, asset building in communities of color and or historically disinvested communities in DC? How do you engage the community in strategy and decision-making? And we ask this question because we really want to award these funds to community-centered projects. And so if you're starting a food co-op in Anacostia, we want to know that people in Anacostia are invited to participate in and be a part of the cooperative as well. What goal will the DC Co-op Impact Grant help you achieve? And so we want to know, for this $10,000, what are you planning to do with it over the 12-month grant period? How are you going to use those funds? Describe the biggest current or anticipated challenge related to your goal and how you plan to address this challenge. For our first round of the grant, we did the applications right before everything shut down for the pandemic. And so that was a challenge that many of them encountered. And so we were able to talk through how they could pivot around that. And so the pandemic remains an ongoing challenge for a lot of business owners and cooperative business owners. And so we want to know how you plan to address those challenges. Have you applied for a small business loan, or are you planning to apply for one in the future? And that should say 2021. And we're asking that because that will have no impact on your eligibility or whether or not you receive the grant. We're just curious because we want to know, is that something that people are working towards, or we just want to see kind of what stage your co-op is at. And then the last 2 questions, if you receive this grant, how do you plan to share your work? we ask this because we want to know how we can amplify the work that you're doing. We want to know, are you already on social media documenting your process? So just asking a little bit more about that. And then lastly, if selected, do you grant permission to photograph, document, or do video for your participation in the grant program? So last year when we announced the grant winners, we announced it with a grant video. And so we really do want to amplify and just let people know that there are co-ops in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And so we just ask your permission so that we can share that. And I see some questions in the chat. So we just have a few more slides and then we will open the floor up for Q&A. So here's some of the things that you can use the grant for. And we also are not very prescriptive about how you can use the grant funds. Some people have used the grant funds to do a feasibility study. So to see, is my idea a good idea? Is there a market for it? You can use it to actually pay for your business licensing or to create bylaws and an operating agreement. You might need to engage a consultant to do that. If you wanted to send people to a co-op conference or pay for someone to go to a co-op training, you may need to pay an accountant or another contractor or consultant. You could use the funds to do an outreach or marketing campaign or a membership campaign. But there really aren't a lot of restrictions on it. We ask you in the application what your use of funds are going to be, and we can let you know if it's not allowed. But there really aren't any restrictions. So quickly, here's the grant timeline. We launched the grant on March 4th. This is the first grant info session. We're having a second grant info session, which will be the same as this one on March 31st. And so if you start doing the application and you have questions, feel free to come back to that info session and ask them, or I'll share my contact information at the end and you can just reach out to me directly. The grant deadline is April 19th. The deadline is 11:59 p.m. I encourage you not to wait until 11:59 p.m. to submit it. So the grant deadline is April 19th. We are going to announce the grant award winners on May 17th. And then once we announce the winners, we'll contact you. We'll let you know you have to complete a form so that we can disperse the funds. And we're hoping to have all the funds out by June 1st. And then on June 30th of the following year, 2022, that's when the grant report will be due. And in the meantime, we'll be checking with you. Allison and I will be here as a resource during the 12 months that you'll be using the grant. And so that is the timeline. The application link, which I'll also drop into the chat box, is here. And also the links for Wacif and Capital Impact Partners websites. After this grant info session, this week we'll be sending out the slide deck and all of these links via email to everyone that registered. And this is my contact information. And so I am going to look at some of the questions that we have in the chat. Also, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you.
And I just wanted to add on the person's question about how can we access the grant. Jennifer gave the link and she's going to drop it into the chat, and you can also find, it's also in the emails that we sent out and up on social media, but you will have to create a submittable account if you don't have one already. So that's the application that we use to manage all the grants, but it's free and it doesn't do anything with your information. You're not going to get a million emails. It should be really straightforward. Let us know if you have any issues, but it seems we've already gotten some applications and it seems to be pretty easy to use.
Okay, great. Thank you, Allison, for that. And if you have any issues with submittable, yes, feel free to just reach out and email us. I see Lisa has asked the question, how many grants are available? For this round, we're doing 4 $10,000 grants. Where can we apply for the grant? You can apply via submittable, and we're going to drop the link in the chat. Any other questions? feel free to raise your hand and I will unmute you. Also, if you'd like to raise your hand and just share more about the co-op that you're working on, then we'd love to hear that as well. All right, questions going once. Questions going twice. Okay, I see a question in the Q&A box. It says, do you have to be officially incorporated? What if you are just an idea? And the answer to that is co-ops in all stages of development are invited to apply. So if you are pre-startup and you just have an idea, then you are more than welcome to apply for this grant. The goal of the grant is to help you get to the next stage of development. So if you're pre-startup, you may want to apply and in your application talk about how you're going to use grant funds to help you get to the next stage of development, whether that be doing a feasibility study, working with a consultant to help you draft your operating agreement with the other members of your co-op planning committee. Those are some of the things that you may want to consider if you are in the pre-startup phase. And Mai asked in the chat if you can go over co-op again. So a co-op is a business that has a shared ownership structure. That means that the people who are involved in the co-op share in the profits of the business, and they also share in the decision-making of the business. So for example, a traditional business might have one owner, or it might be owned by a partnership. So there are a few owners, but everyone else is an employee. And so the owners make the decision in a traditional business and the employees do the work and they get paid a wage, but the profits, the distribution of the profits is determined by the owners. But in a cooperative business, for example, in a worker-owned cooperative, the workers are also owners in the business. And so they share in the decision-making in the business. They share in deciding what will happen with the profits, and they also share in those profits. And so a cooperative business is a business that has a shared ownership structure. Any other questions about that? And I see that Allison just dropped the link to the grant in the chat. That is the link to the application. We'll also send out the link in the follow-up email along with the slide deck. Any other questions? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, then we are going to go ahead and end early. If you have any questions while you are completing the grant application, please feel free to reach out to me. You can contact me by email or phone. My email is jbryant@wacif.org. You can also reach me by phone at 202-529-5505, extension 225. Again, the grant deadline is April 19th, and we'll be doing a second grant info session webinar on March 31st at 2 p.m. That one's during the day. So feel free to come back if you have any questions. And Allison, is there anything you wanted to say to close out?
I just wanted to reiterate the point that Jennifer made earlier of if you've never applied for a grant before, I would encourage you to. Don't feel intimidated. We understand that it's a crazy time right now. People have a lot of stresses and pressures, and just, write it as if you were speaking and describing your project and talking about your community, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions or concerns.
Sure, and I'll go back. Someone just asked if I can share my phone number again. And yes, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll go back to that page. My number is 202-529-5505, extension 225. So feel free to reach out to me. Weekdays 9 to 5, I am available. And I had folks reach out to me during the last round just to ask me questions about, this is what I'm doing, is this eligible? Or this is what we're thinking about doing with the grant funds, is that allowed? So feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call. And thank you so much for joining us for the webinar. And we'll send out the slide deck and links in the follow-up email. Thank you. Have a great night.